election to reclaim constitutional governance.
Absolutely, we need to. It's a simple document. In one of our books, when you donate, we actually have the Declaration of Independence and we have the Constitution. It's important just to understand it's a simple system. If we stick with it, things go well for us. When we go away from it, look what's just happened in the last umpteen years, you know. So it's like we need to get back to the basics.
Yeah, back to the basics. That sounds like common sense to me, sir. Thank you so much. Doug Maddox, the producer of the film, The American Miracle. We'll see you at CPAC.
Okay, see you then. Thanks so much.
And that'll be quite awesome when you guys are there to see the George Washington and Martha, show up. Hopefully do a fun interview with them and just talk to them. That'll be great too.
Oh yes, I love people who do the reenactments and then you get to see it in real time. Even from my neck of the woods, a couple of actors, husband and wife as well, who do Mr. and Mrs. Abraham Lincoln as well. So a nod to the land of Lincoln. But this wonderful website again, AmericanMiracleMovie.com. The American Miracle, Our Nation is No Accident. So I implore you to go to the website and donate and look how you can stream these wonderful resources. And I love anything with Kevin Sorbo in it. What a gentleman and a great actor.
It definitely is. Actually, Kevin, in London right now for the ARC conference, Jordan Peterson and others in London at this point. So, all right, we're seeing a live picture, of course, of the Capitol and the White House. We're live here in Alabama. And you know what? It's time to talk about Angel Paste because they're from Spring, Texas. And isn't it great that this company also hires military veterans?
Yes, and Christian-based. And what's neat about their creams as well, non-GMO, no chemicals. And I've tried it here on the network myself. My dry skin, eliminated. And you don't have that shine, that residue that lasts too long. But think about this. If you're in an area like we live, a little more mosquitoes, it gets to be a humid summer, just a humid climate in general. That's especially true off of the Gulf of America outside of Houston, Texas. So Angel Paste has created a cream that's actually mosquito repellent. So forget DEET, forget all the chemicals that are sprayed in the air. You smell that. It's not good for you during the summertime. Just put this on your hands. Kill two birds with one stone. Get rid of that dry skin and then also have a miracle cream that actually hydrates you with vitamin Bs, vitamin Cs, everything you need. And guys, trust me on this. You can still grip the tackle box. So don't worry, it's not just for the ladies out there.
Definitely. So it's angelpaste.com. Use that RSBN promo code for a discount. A great sponsor here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. It's $2.49, and this is RSBN Live. I'm Matthew Alvarez alongside Robert McNeely here. A lot of news going on, as you guys know. Let's talk about it. One story that we're looking at right now is the possibility of a winter storm hitting the southeast and the middle Atlantic states, the northeast as well. So we're keeping our eye on that. On top of that, the Doge found that $4.7 trillion, as you guys have probably heard, in untraceable funds.
Right.
They found $4.7 trillion. The interesting thing about that is only China and our country have a higher GDP than that. Every other country is lower than a $4.7 trillion GDP. That's the amount of dollars, of our dollars, that are untraceable. Thoughts?
It really is. I mean, no words, actually. I mean, the thought that you can waste that much, where is it going? We're starting to find how egregious some of this was, all part of a globalist plan to enrich themselves and destroy a country. And this is biblical, to keep your finances in order. And now with Elon Musk and people like President Trump, perhaps we can get that under control once and for all.
You used a great word there, enrich. So this is unfortunate that this happens. It's terrible. But that people enrich themselves off of other people. We get that happens, but to see the amount of money that certain people within government have enriched themselves off of our dollars, it reminds me, and this is RSBN, so we are pro free speech. So here we go. You ready? There are some out there in leadership positions, whether it's a church or whether it's whatever, that enrich themselves off of the people every day. And it's terrible. And it's terrible to see this happening at the government level at this extent. But what's great is we see President Trump and Elon Musk and the whole crew doing great things for our nation. And that leads me to coverage from Friday where Robert McNeely was here hosting and President Trump was exiting Marine One at Joint Base Andrews. And I posted it on Truth Social and I said, This is the George Washington of our time. Let's take a look at this great moment with President Trump just the other day.
Absolutely epic. A true commander-in-chief. Did you add that music?
Well, this is music from Apple iMovie, so you're allowed to use it. So therefore, I said, you know what? It's the thing I like the most though about it, Bobby, is that he comes out off that the Marine One and shakes the hand of the Marine, pats the other one on the shoulder. But did you notice? I don't know if he gave him maybe a challenge coin or a medal of some sort, because in his left hand, if you rewatch that, he hands him something and then shakes his hand.
Right.
Then they salute. I mean, just what a cool moment. But my buddy actually said it the other day. He said, this is the George Washington of our time. Do we really understand what we're living in right now for our nation?
Right.
Literally.
And I'm trying to remember the specific movie. It might be An Officer and a Gentleman with Richard Gere. And when they're saluting at the graduation, and their specific branches might be the Marines. Specifically, I have to look back at that. But a coin is offered from the commanding officer to the graduate, so usually a second lieutenant. And that deems someone that is highly looked at by that commanding officer. So maybe that was a situation, President Trump, a personal relationship there perhaps. You already have to be rather regarded to even be in a position to be on Marine One or greeting him at Joint Base Andrews with the Air Force as well. So a special moment from the Commander-in-Chief. So I'm very curious to hear about what that medallion was specifically.
Okay, so speaking of the Marines and speaking of military, before we get to this video, to your point, President Trump still just continues on and says hello to the Marines. He says hello to we the people. He doesn't act like, I'm the president, I don't need to say hi to you. He's that kind of guy, and we like that about him, of course. Let's look at the southern border. This is a recent video of all the work that's being done there between January and February. Take a look.
We've been doing, we started operations here where we've been clearing out some of that debris and the cane that's growing over the ledge there on the bank. This makes it easier for Border Patrol to operate. First we came down with the dozer, kind of widened up this road area. Then we came over with the grader to kind of level things off. That allowed us to get our excavator down there to where it's on a level playing field and be able to scrape away that debris.
Presence, I honestly have noticed, is just a natural deterrent. Just being out here is kind of like, okay, show of force, being a presence, and it works.
We're trained to do various things. You know, it's not only just combat. And then utilizing our group of engineers that's out here, like them to just appreciate to say like, hey, our guys can do that too.
Texas Guard is just the labor entity. It's just the force. It's the presence. As much as I'm a soldier first, you know, I'm a person too, right? And that matters.
Okay, so that video was conducted by Sergeant First Class Christy Van Drunen. This is video access that we have with the Department of Defense. These are videos that are a public service that were allowed to air here at the network. What you saw there was the U.S. soldiers with the California Army National Guard, the Texas National Guard's Tactical Border Force, and Operation Lone Star conducting security operations along the southern border in New Mexico and Texas. I said earlier that that was California. That's from other video that we have here at the network. Still though, same picture all across our southern border. President Trump saying it was a national emergency, and it sure is, and it's getting taken care of.
Yeah, getting the job done. And if you follow the MAGA Minute by Caroline Leavitt, the great White House press secretary, she mentioned last week that the border crossings down 87% at the ports and at the border. And roughly last week, just over 300, and that keeps ticking down. So what an extraordinary number versus, I believe, right at the end of the Biden administration, nearly 11,000 trying to cross over in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in roughly 4 weeks, how this whole game has changed. And we now know that either the former president and Secretary Mayorkas and those responsible for defending the border either were incompetent or simply not telling the truth, because these gentlemen, President Trump, along with Tom Homan, have used the executive authority authorized in them by the executive branch of the government, constitutional, to close this border and protect people. And then, of course, Secretary Noem as well, going on those raids with ICE to make sure the bad guys are in Guantanamo Bay or elsewhere.
Exactly. So Customs and Border Protection, they're saying apprehensions along the southwestern border plummeted in January. The daily rate of apprehensions dropped more, of course, as you were mentioning, from that 11,000 per day with the other administration to about 229 just in the past 24 hours. According to newly released data from Customs and Border Protection, just 61,465 illegal aliens were apprehended at the southern border during the entire month of January. So 61,465. That's a 36% decline from the previous month. That number includes 29,116 apprehended along the border. That's the lowest since May of 2020, and 32,349 at ports of entry. So after President Trump took office, the apprehensions declined even more rapidly. So there's a whole report there that the White House has released in regards to that, as we see a double beautiful picture of the U.S. Capitol and the White House, of course, as we're looking forward to hearing the Washington farewell address. Again, that's an annual tradition on the Senate floor.
And it'll be Mississippi Senator Roger Wicker who will be reading that immortal speech from 1796. That's the beauty of George Washington. He really set the pace for the American presidency, serving 2 terms and then voluntarily leaving the office, not running for a 3rd consecutive term. That really was recognized up until the 32nd president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was elected to 4 terms, died in office. And then, of course, they term limited the president after that just to 2 terms in a lifetime. But it's not necessarily who is in there for 4 to 8 years in your bottom right-hand corner there, but also the people who spend 30, 40, 50 years in Congress. You can see on your split screen as well. So maybe perhaps we bring some term limits to congressmen as well.
Yeah, that'd be good to see. And I'm sure, actually my mom said that just yesterday. It's funny. We were on a phone call and we were talking about that. Let's go to a sponsor, and there's a few more things we'll be talking about here as it's the top of the hour, about 3 o'clock, getting ready to go there to the U.S. Senate floor. Colonial Metals Group, of course, the urgent retirement warning coming out, talking about including Warren Buffett, who actually dumped $133 billion in stocks as they're fleeing Wall Street.
Right.
Others, Larry Page, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of the world's largest bank. But at the end of the day, when there's this kind of turmoil going on financially, of course, we want Maganomics in place. But it's always good to have gold and silver through tax-sheltered IRA, a 401k, and it's just freegoldguide.com.
Right, and it will detail in there for you the 7,000% increase. Yes, 7,000% in growth of gold from 1971 to 2024. It's never gone down in value. So this is the time-tested commodity to protect you and your family in retirement and those big things around the corner. Maybe you're sending a kid to college, maybe they're in college right now, and those expenses are going out the window. Great to back it up with gold, silver, tangible metals. Scan that QR code now, shield your savings, and do what Warren Buffett's doing, literally taking all that money, billions out of the stock market, putting it into gold and silver. Colonial Metals Group. I think we're talking to Paul Stone again on Friday as well. Squeeze that in during CPAC coverage as well. And he's quite an expert at all this, and we love to have him on the show to detail that.
Definitely. So this info kit you can get. Just go to freegoldguide.com/RSBN. All right, it's the top of the hour. It's 3 o'clock. Looking forward to going to the U.S. Senate chamber there to hear the George Washington's farewell address. That will be, again, from the Mississippi Senator Roger Wicker. When we talk about history like this, we see a number of things like Mount Washington, that's in Pittsburgh, PA, Mount Rushmore. A lot of people say President Trump's face should be etched in stone there. I agree with that. I know you do as well. But why not have his Well, let's go there live to D.C.
We pause to thank you for life and health and love. Faced with challenges that demand greater than human wisdom, we find comfort in the knowledge that you really care. Free us from guilt through the power of your limitless forgiveness. Today, O Lord, keep our lawmakers faithful in the performance of their duties. Remind them of their total dependence on you. Open their minds to opportunities to do your work on earth. Lord, give them wisdom for the crucial decisions that affect our nation and world. Today, as we recall George Washington's address to the American people, inspire us all to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with you. We pray in your merciful name. Amen.
In the Pledge of Allegiance, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pursuant to the order of the Senate of January 24th, 1901, as modified by the order of February 11th, 2025, the senator from Mississippi, Mr. Wicker, will now read Washington's farewell address.
Thank you, Mr. President. And 1790, George Washington to the American. The immediate purpose of this message was to notify his fellow citizens that he would not seek a third term as president. Beyond that, George Washington chose the occasion to provide profound parting advice to his countrymen. In what has become known as George Washington's acclaimed farewell address, our first president gave advice and counsel regarding a wide range of issues: foreign policy, the accumulation of debt, excessive partisanship, the separation of powers, and the role of religion and morality in public life. Of course, this was not the first time President Washington had let go of power. Just down the hall from where I stand right now, in the Capitol Rotunda, hangs a painting by John Trumbull. It depicts George Washington resigning his commission as General of the Continental Army. This took place on December 23rd, 1783. In the painting, General Washington is dressed in full military garb. He is an image of strength, a commanding presence. He had led a small army to victory against a powerful empire. If he had wanted to, the American people, no doubt, would have given him power for life. Instead, the painting shows Washington with a hand outstretched, giving his resignation letter to the Continental Congress, relinquishing power. Almost 250 years later, Trumbull's painting remains in the rotunda. Presidents, senators, representatives, justices, and cabinet officials have passed it as they've gone about the business of the country. Generations of families and school groups have craned their necks to gaze at this 12 by 18-foot depiction of humility. Today, it might strike viewers as odd that we devote an entire painting to that moment, but in the late 1700s, and certainly in the history of the world at that time, this was rare. Most leaders did not voluntarily relinquish power. The Senate's annual reading of this letter can keep us from taking Washington's decision to step down from the presidency for granted. I'm a huge fan of Lin-Manuel Miranda's famous musical Hamilton. Miranda put it well when he wrote that George Washington wanted to teach them how to say goodbye. By his actions and his words, he did teach Americans how to relinquish power. He also charged us to stay the course in this great experiment of self-government. I'm grateful to my colleagues for giving me the opportunity to read these words to you today. And so, pursuant to their invitation, I do read the words of George Washington. Friends and fellow citizens, the period for a new election of a citizen to administer the executive government of the United States being not far distant, and the time actually arrived when your thoughts must be employed in designating the person who is to be clothed with that important trust, it appears to me proper, especially as it may conduce to a more distinct expression of the public voice, that I should now apprise you of the resolution I have formed, to decline being considered among the number out of those from whom a choice is to be made. I beg you at this same time to do me the justice to be assured that this resolution has not been taken without a strict regard to all the considerations appertaining to the relation which binds a dutiful citizen to his country, and that in withdrawing the tender of service which silence in my situation might imply, I am influenced by no diminution of zeal for your future interest, no deficiency of grateful respect for your past kindness, but am supported by a full conviction that the step is compatible with both. The acceptance of and continuation hitherto in the office to which your suffrages have twice called me have been a uniform sacrifice of inclination to the opinion of duty and to a deference for what appeared to be your desire. I constantly hoped that it would have been much earlier in my power, consistently with motives which I was not at liberty to disregard, to return to that retirement from which I had been reluctantly drawn. The strength of my inclination to do this, previous to the last election, had even led to the preparation of an address to declare it to you. But mature reflection on the then perplexed and critical posture of our affairs with foreign nations, and the unanimous advice of persons entitled to my confidence, impelled me to abandon the idea. I rejoice that the state of your concerns, external as well as internal, no longer renders the pursuit of inclination incompatible with the sentiment of duty or propriety. And I'm persuaded, whatever partiality may be retained for my services, that in the present circumstances of our country, you will not disapprove my determination to retire. The impressions with which I first undertook the arduous trust were explained on the proper occasion. In the discharge of this trust, I will only say that I have, with good intentions, contributed towards the organization and administration of the government, the best exertions of which a very fallible judgment was capable. Not unconscious in the outset of the inferiority of my qualifications, experience in my own eyes, perhaps still more in the eyes of others, has strengthened the motives of diffidence of myself, and every day the increasing weight of years admonishes me more and more that the shade of retirement is as necessary to me as it will be welcome. Satisfied that if any circumstances have given peculiar value to my services, they were temporary. I have the consolation to believe that while choice and prudence invite me to quit the political scene, patriotism does not forbid it. In looking forward to the moment which is intended to terminate the career of my public life, my feelings do not permit me to suspend the deep acknowledgement of that debt of gratitude which I owe to my beloved country for the many honors it has conferred upon me. Still more, for the steadfast confidence with which it has supported me, and for the opportunities I have thence enjoyed of manifesting my inviolable attachment by services faithful and persevering, though in usefulness unequal to my zeal. If benefits have resulted to our country from these services, let it always be remembered to your praise, and as an instructive example in our annals that under circumstances in which the passions agitated in every direction were liable to mislead, amidst appearances sometimes dubious, vicissitudes of fortune often discouraging, in situations which not unfrequently want of success has countenanced the spirit of criticism, the constancy of your support was the essential prop of the efforts and a guarantee of the plans by which they were effected. Profoundly penetrated with this idea, I shall carry it with me to my grave as a strong incitement to unceasing vows that heaven may continue to you the choicest tokens of its beneficence, that your union and brotherly affection may be perpetual, that the free Constitution, which is the work of your hands, may be sacredly maintained, that its administration in every department may be stamped with wisdom and virtue, that, in fine, the happiness of the people of these states, under the auspices of liberty, may be made complete by so careful a preservation and so prudent a use of this blessing as will acquire to them the glory of recommending it to the applause, the affection, and adoption of every nation which is yet a stranger to it. Here, perhaps, I ought to stop. But a solicitude of your welfare, which cannot end but with my life, and the apprehension of danger natural to that solicitude, urge me on an occasion like the present to offer to your solemn contemplation and to recommend to your frequent review some sentiments which are the result of much reflection, of no inconsiderable observation, and which appear to me all important to the permanency of your felicity as a people. These will be offered to you with the more freedom as you can only see them in the disinterested warnings of a parting friend who could possibly have no personal motive to bias his counsel. Nor can I forget, as an encouragement to it, your indulgent reception of my sentiments on a former and not dissimilar occasion. Interwoven as is the love of liberty with every ligament of your hearts, no recommendation of mine is necessary to fortify or confirm the attachment. The unity of government which constitutes you one people is also now dear to you. It is justly so, for it is a main pillar of the edifice of your real independence, the support of your tranquility at home, your peace abroad, of your safety, of your prosperity, of that very liberty which you so highly prize. But as easy to foresee that from different causes and from different quarters, much pains will be taken, many artifices employed to weaken your minds the conviction of this truth, as this is the point of your political fortress against which batteries of internal and external enemies will be most constantly and actively, though often covertly and insidiously, directed. It is of infinite moment that you should properly estimate the immense value of your national union to your collective and individual happiness, that you should cherish a cordial, habitual, and immovable attachment to it, accustoming yourselves to think and speak of it as of the palladium of your political safety and prosperity, watching for its preservation with jealous anxiety, discountenancing whatever may suggest even a suspension that it can in any event be abandoned, and indignantly frowning upon the first dawning of every attempt to alienate any portion of our country from the rest, or to enfeeble the sacred ties which now link together the various parts. For you have every inducement of sympathy. For you, in this regard, I have every inducement of sympathy and interest. Citizens by birth or choice of a common country, a country that has a right to concentrate your affections. The name of American, which belongs to you in your national capacity, must always exalt the just pride of patriotism more than any appellation derived from local discriminations. With slight shades of difference, you have the same religion, manners, habits, and political principles. You have in a common cause fought and triumphed together. The independence and liberty you possess are the work of joint councils and joint efforts, of common dangers, sufferings, and successes. But these considerations, however powerfully they address themselves to your sensibility, are greatly outweighed by those which apply more immediately to your interest. Here, every portion of our country finds the most commanding motives for carefully guarding and preserving the Union as a whole. The North, in an unrestrained intercourse with the South, protected by the equal laws of a common government, finds the productions of the latter great additional resources of maritime and commercial enterprise and precious materials of manufacturing industry. The South, in the same intercourse, benefiting by the agency of the North, sees its agriculture grow and its commerce expand. Turning partly into its own channels, the seamen of the North, it finds its particular navigation invigorated. And while it contributes in different ways to nourish and increase the general mass of the national navigation, it looks forward to the protection of a maritime strength to which itself is unequally adapted. In the East, in a like intercourse with the West, already finds, and in the progressive improvement of interior communications by land and water will more and more find, a valuable vent for the commodities which it brings from abroad or manufactures at home. The West derives from the East supplies requisite to its growth and comfort. And what is perhaps of still greater consequence, it must of necessity owe the secure enjoyment of indispensable outlets for its own productions to the weight, influence, and the future maritime strength of the Atlantic side of the Union, directed by an indissoluble community of interest as one nation. Any other tenure by which the West can hold this essential advantage, whether derived from its own separate strength or from an apostate and unnatural connection with any foreign power, must be intrinsically precarious. While then every part of the country thus feels an immediate and particular interest in the Union, all the parts combined cannot fail to find in the united mass of means and efforts greater strength, greater resources, proportionably greater security from external danger, a less frequent interruption of their peace by foreign nations. And what is of inestimable value, they must derive from union and exemption from those broils and wars between themselves, which so frequently afflict neighboring countries not tied together by the same government, which their own rivalships alone would be sufficient to produce, but which opposite foreign alliances, attachments, and intrigues would stimulate and embitter. Hence, likewise, they will avoid the necessity of those overgrown military establishments, which under any form of government are inauspicious to liberty, and which are to be regarded as particularly hostile to republican liberty. In this case, it is that your union ought to be considered as a main prop of your liberty, and that the love of one ought to endear you to the preservation of the other. These considerations speak a pervasive language to every reflecting and virtuous mind and exhibit the continuance of the Union as a primary object of patriotic desire. Is there a doubt whether a common government can embrace so large a sphere? Let experience solve it. To listen to mere speculation in such a case were criminal. We are authorized to hope that a proper organization of the whole with the auxiliary agency of governments for the respective subdivisions will afford a happy issue to the experiment. It is well worth a fair and full experiment. With such powerful and obvious motives to union affecting all parts of our country, while experience shall not have demonstrated its impracticality, there will always be a reason to distrust the patriotism of those who in any quarter may endeavor to weaken its bands. In contemplating the causes which may disturb our union, it occurs as a matter of serious concern that any ground should have been furnished for characterizing parties by geographical discriminations, northern and southern, Atlantic and western, whence designing men may endeavor to excite a belief that there's a real difference of local interest and views. One of the expedients of party to acquire influence within a particular district is to misrepresent the opinions and aims of other districts. You cannot shield yourselves too much against the jealousies and heartburnings which spring from these misrepresentations. They tend to render alien to each other those who ought to be bound together by fraternal affection. The inhabitants of our Western country have lately had a useful lesson on this head. They've seen the negotiation by the executive and in the unanimous ratification by the Senate of the treaty with Spain and the universal satisfaction at that event throughout the United States, a decisive proof how unfounded were the suspicions propagated among them of a policy in the general government and in the Atlantic states unfriendly to their interests in regard to the Mississippi. They have been witnesses to the formation of two treaties, that with Great Britain and with Spain, which secure to them everything they could desire in respect to our foreign relations, towards confirming their prosperity. Will it not be their wisdom to rely for the preservation of these advantages on the union by which they were procured? Will they not henceforth be deaf to those advisers, if such there are, who would sever them from their brethren and connect them with aliens? To the efficacy and permanency of your union, a government for the whole is indispensable. No alliances, however strict, between the parts can be an adequate substitute. They must inevitably experience the infractions and interruptions which all alliances in all times have experienced. Sensible to this momentous truth, you have improved upon your first essay by the adoption of a constitution of government better calculated than your former, for an intimate union and for the efficacious management of your common concerns. This government, the offspring of your own choice, and uninfluenced and awed, adopted upon the full investigation and mature deliberations, completely free in its principles, in the distribution of its powers, uniting security with energy and containing within itself a provision for its own amendment, has a just claim to your confidence and to your support. Respect for its authority, compliance with its laws, acquiescence in its measures are duties enjoined by the fundamental maxims of true liberty. The basis of our political systems is the right of the people to make and to alter their constitutions of government. But the Constitution, which at any time exists until changed by an explicit and authentic act of the whole people, is sacredly obligatory upon all. The very idea of the power and the right of the people to establish government presupposes the duty of every individual to obey the established government. All obstructions to the execution of the laws, all combinations and associations under whatever plausible character with the real design to direct, control, counteract, or all the regular deliberation and action of the constituted authorities are destructive of this fundamental principle and of fatal tendency. They serve to organize faction, to give it an artificial and extraordinary force, to put in the place of the delegated will of the nation the will of a party, often a small but artful and enterprising minority of the community. And according to the alternate triumphs of different parties, to make the public administration the mirror of the ill-concerted and incongruous projects of faction, rather than the organ of consistent and wholesome plans digested by common councils and modified by mutual interest. However, combinations or associations of the above description may now and then answer popular ends, they are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. Towards the preservation of your government and the permanency of your present happy state, it is requisite not only that you steadily discountenance irregular oppositions to the acknowledged authority, but that you also resist with care the spirit of innovation upon its principles, however specious the pretext. One method of assault may be to effect, in the forms of the Constitution, alterations which will impair the energy of the system and thus to undermine what cannot directly be overthrown. In all the changes to which you may be invited, remember that time and habit are at least as necessary to fix the true character of governance as of other human institutions. That experience is the surest standard by which to test the real tendency of the existing constitution of a country. That facility in changes upon the credit of mere hypotheses and opinion exposes the perpetual change from the endless variety of hypotheses and opinion. And remember especially that for the efficient management of your common interests in a country so extensive as ours, a government of as much vigor as is consistent with the perfect security of liberty is indispensable. Liberty itself will find in such a government, with powers properly distributed and adjusted, its surest guardian. It is indeed little else than a name where the government is too feeble to withstand the enterprises of faction, to confine each member of the society within the limits prescribed by the laws, and to maintain all the secure and tranquil enjoyment of the rights of person and property. I've already intimated to you the danger of parties in the state, with particular reference to the founding of them on geographical discriminations. Let me now take a more comprehensive view and warn you in the most solemn manner against the baneful effects of the spirit of party generally. This spirit, unfortunately, is inseparable from our nature, having its root in the strongest passions of the human mind. It exists under different shapes in all governments, more or less stifled, controlled, or repressed. But in those of the popular form, it is seen in its greatest rankness and is truly their worst enemy. The alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetuated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. But this leads at length to a more formal and permanent despotism. The orders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual. And sooner or later, the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns this disposition to the purposes of his own elevation on the ruins of public liberty. Without looking forward to an extremity of this kind, which nevertheless ought not to be entirely out of sight, the common and continual mischiefs of the spirit of party are sufficient to make it in the interest and the duty of a wise people to discourage and restrain it. It serves always to distract the public councils and enfeeble the public administration. It agitates the community with ill-founded jealousies and false alarms, kindles the animosity of one party against another, foments occasionally riot and insurrection. It opens the door to foreign influence and corruption, which finds a facilitated access to the government itself through the channels of party passions. Thus, the policy and the will of one country are subjected to the policy and will of another. There's an opinion that parties in free countries are useful checks upon the administration of the government and serve to keep alive the spirit of liberty. This, within certain limits, is probably true. And in governments of a monarchical caste, patriotism may look with indulgence, if not with favor, upon the spirit of party. But in those of the popular character, in governments purely elective, it is a spirit not to be encouraged. From their natural tendency, it is certain there will always be enough of that spirit for every salutary purpose. And there being constant danger of excess, the effort ought to be, by force of public opinion, to mitigate and assuage it. A fire not to be quenched, it demands a uniform vigilance to prevent its bursting into flame, lest instead of warming, it should consume. It is important, likewise, that the habits of thinking in a free country should inspire caution in those entrusted with its administration to confine themselves with their respective constitutional spheres, avoiding in the exercise of the powers of one department to encroach upon the other. The spirit of encroachment tends to consolidate the powers of all the departments in one, and thus to create, whatever the form of government, a real despotism. A just estimate of that love of power and proneness to abuse it, which predominates in the human heart, is sufficient to satisfy us of the truth of this position. The necessity of reciprocal checks in the exercise of political power by dividing and distributing it into different depositories and constituting each the guardian of the public weal against invasions by the others has been evinced by experiments ancient and modern, some of them in our country, under our own eyes. To preserve them must be as necessary as to institute them. If, in the opinion of the people, the distribution or modification of the constitutional powers may be in any particular wrong, let it be corrected by an amendment in the way which the Constitution designates. But let there be no change by usurpation. For though this, in one instance, may be the instrument of good, it is the customary weapon by which free governments are destroyed. The precedent must always greatly overbalance in permanent evil any partial or transient benefit which the use can at any time yield. Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. A mere politician, equally with the pious man, ought to respect and to cherish them. A volume could not trace all the connections with private and public felicity. Let it simply be asked, where is the security for prosperity, for reputation, for life, if the sense of religious obligation desert the oaths which are the instruments of investigation in courts of justice? And let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on minds of peculiar structure, reason, and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principles. It is substantially true that virtue or morality is a necessary spring of popular government. The rule indeed extends with more or less force to every species of free government. Who that is a desire, who that is a sincere friend to it, can look with indifference upon attempts to shake the foundation of the fabric. Promote then, as an object of primary importance, institutions for the general diffusion of knowledge. In proportion as the structure of a government gives force to public opinion, it is essential that public opinion should be enlightened. As a very important source of strength and security, cherish public credit. One method of preserving it is to use it as sparingly as possible, avoiding occasions of expense by cultivating peace, but remembering also that timely disbursements to prepare for danger frequently prevent much greater disbursements to repel it. Avoiding likewise the accumulation of debt, not only by shunning occasions of expense, but by vigorous exertions in time of peace to discharge the debts, which unavoidable wars may have occasioned, not ungenerously throwing upon posterity the burden which we ourselves ought to bear. The execution of these maxims belongs to your representatives, but it is necessary that public opinion should cooperate. To facilitate them the performance of their duty, it is essential that you should practically bear in mind that towards the payment of debts there must be revenue. That to have revenue there must be taxes. That no taxes can be devised which are not more or less inconvenient and unpleasant. That the intrinsic embarrassment inseparable from the selection of the proper objects, which is always a choice of difficulties, ought to be a decisive motive for a candid construction of the conduct of the government in making it, and for a spirit of acquiescence in the measures for obtaining revenue, which the public exigencies may at any time dictate. Observe good faith and justice towards all nations. Cultivate peace and harmony with all. Religion and morality enjoin this conduct, and can it be that good policy does not equally enjoin it? It will be worthy of a free, enlightened, and in no distant period, a great nation, to give to mankind the magnanimous and too novel example of a people always guided by an exalted justice and benevolence. Who can doubt that in the course of time and things, the fruits of such a plan would richly repay any temporary advantages which might be lost by a steady adherence to it? Can it be that Providence has not connected the permanent felicity of a nation with its virtue? The experiment, at least, is recommended by every sentiment which ennobles human nature. Alas, it is rendered impossible by its vices. In the execution of such a plan, nothing is more essential than that permanent, inveterate antipathies against particular nations and passionate attachments for others should be excluded, and that in place of them, just and amicable feelings towards all should be cultivated. The nation which indulges toward another an habitual hatred or an habitual fondness is in some degrees a slave. It is a slave to its animosity or to its affection, either of which is sufficient to lead it astray from its duty and interest. Antipathy in one nation against another disposes each more readily to offer insult and injury, to lay hold of slight causes of umbrage, and to be haughty and intractable when accidental or trifling occasions of dispute occur. Hence, frequent collisions, obstinate, envenomed, and bloody contests. The nation, prompted by ill will and resentment, sometimes impels to war the government contrary to the best calculations of policy. The government sometimes participates in the national propensity and adopts through passion what reason would reject. At other times, it makes the animosity of the one nation subservient to projects of hostility, instigated by pride, ambition, and other sinister and pernicious motives. The peace often, sometimes perhaps the liberty of nations has been the victim. So likewise, a passionate attachment of one nation for another produces a variety of evils. Sympathy for the favorite nation, facilitating the illusion of an imaginary common interest in cases where no real common interest exists, and infusing into one the enmities of the other, betrays the former into a participation in the quarrels and wars of the latter, without adequate inducement or justification. It leads also to concessions to the favorite nation of privileges denied to others, which is apt doubly to injure the nation making the concessions by unnecessarily parting with what ought to have been retained and by exciting jealousy, ill will, and a disposition to retaliate in the parties from whom equal privileges are withheld. And it gives to ambitious, corrupted, or deluded citizens who devote themselves to the favorite nation facility to betray or sacrifice the interest of their own country without odium, sometimes even with popularity, gilding with the appearances of a virtuous sense of obligation, a commendable deference for public opinion, or a laudable zeal for public good, the base or foolish compliances of ambition, corruption, or infatuation. As avenues to foreign influence in innumerable ways, such attachments are particularly alarming to the truly enlightened and independent patriot. How many opportunities do they afford to tamper with domestic factions, to practice the arts of seduction, to mislead public opinion, to interfere, to influence, or awe the public councils? Such an attachment of a small or weak towards a great and powerful nation dooms the former to be the satellite of the latter. Against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, I conjure you to believe me, fellow citizens. The jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake, since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of republican government. But that jealousy, to be useful, must be impartial, else it becomes the instrument of the very influence to be avoided, instead of a defense against it. Excessive partialities for one foreign nation and excessive dislike of another cause those whom they actuate to see danger only on one side and to serve to veil and even second the arts of influence on the other. Real patriots who may resist the intrigues of the favorite are liable to become suspected and odious, while its tools and dupes usurp the applause and confidence of the people to surrender their interest. The great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is in extending our commercial relations to have with them as little political connection as possible. So as far as we've already formed engagements, let them be fulfilled with perfect good faith. Here, let us stop. Europe has a set of primary interests, which to us have none or very remote relation. Hence, she must be engaged in frequent controversies, the causes of which are essentially foreign to our concerns. Hence, therefore, it must be unwise in us to implicate ourselves by artificial ties in the ordinary vicissitudes of her politics or the ordinary combinations and collisions of her friendships or enmities. Our detached and distant situation invites and enables us to pursue a different course. If we remain one people under an efficient government, the period is not far off when we may defy material injury from external annoyance. When we may take such an attitude as will cause the neutrality we may at any time resolve upon to be scrupulously respected. When belligerent nations, under the impossibility of making acquisitions upon us, will not lightly hazard the giving us provocation. When we may choose peace or war as our interest, guided by justice, shall counsel. Why forego the advantages of so peculiar a situation? Why quit our own to stand upon foreign ground? Why, by interweaving our destiny with that of any part of Europe, entangle our peace and prosperity in the toils of European ambition, rivalship, interest, humor, or caprice? It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. So far, I mean, as we are now at liberty to do it, for let me not be understood as capable of patronizing infidelity to existing engagements. I hold the maximum no less applicable to public than to private affairs, that honesty is always the best policy. I repeat it, therefore, let those engagements be observed in their genuine sense, but in my opinion, it is unnecessary and would be unwise to extend them. Taking care always to keep ourselves by suitable establishments on a respectably defensive posture. We may safely trust to temporary alliances for extraordinary emergencies. Harmony, liberal intercourse with all nations are recommended by policy, humanity, and interest. But even our commercial policy should hold an equal and impartial hand, neither seeking nor granting exclusive favors or preferences, consulting the natural course of things, diffusing and diversifying by gentle means the streams of commerce, but forcing nothing, establishing with power so disposed in order to give to trade a stable course, to define the rights of our merchants, and to enable the government to support them. Conventional rules of intercourse, the best that present circumstances and mutual opinion will permit, but temporary and liable from time to time, abandoned or varied, as experience and circumstances shall dictate. Consistently keeping in view that it is folly in one nation to look for disinterested favors from another, that it must pay with a portion of its independence for whatever it may accept under that character, that by such acceptance it may place itself in the condition of having given equivalents for nominal favors, and yet being reproached with ingratitude for not giving more. There can be no greater error than to expect or calculate upon real favors from nation to nation. It is an illusion which experience must cure, which a just pride ought to discard. In offering you, my countrymen, these counsels of an old and affectionate friend, I dare not hope they will make the strong and lasting impression I could wish, that they will control the usual current of the passions or prevent our nation from running the course which has hitherto marked the destiny of nations. But if I may even flatter myself that they may be productive of some partial benefit, some occasional good, that they may now and then recur to moderate the fury of party spirit, to warn against the mischiefs of foreign intrigue, to guard against the impostures of pretended patriotism. This hope will be a full recompense for the solicitude of your welfare, by which they have been dictated. How far in the discharge of my official duties I have been guided by the principles which have been delineated, the public records or other evidences of my conduct must witness to you and to the world. To myself, the assurance of my own conscience is that I have at least believed myself to be guided by them. In relation to the still subsisting war in Europe, my proclamation of the 22nd of April, 1793, is the index to my plan. Sanctioned by your approving voice and by that of your representatives in both houses of Congress, the spirit of that measure has continually governed me, uninfluenced by any attempts to deter or divert me from it. After deliberate examination, with the aid of the best lights I could obtain, I was well satisfied that our country, under all the circumstances of the case, had a right to take and was bound in duty and interest to take a neutral position. Having taken it, I determined, as far as should depend on me, to maintain it with moderation, perseverance, and firmness. The considerations with respect to the right to hold this conduct is not necessary on this occasion to detail. I will only observe that according to my understanding of the matter, that right, so far as being denied by any of the belligerent powers, has been virtually admitted by all. The duty of holding a neutral conduct may be inferred without anything more from the obligation which justice and humanity impose on every nation in cases in which it is free to act, to maintain inviolate the relations of peace and amity towards other nations. The inducements of interest for observing that conduct will best be referred to your own reflections and experience. With me, a predominant motive has been to endeavor to gain time to our country to settle and mature its yet recent institutions, and to progress without interruption to that degree of strength and consistency, which is necessary to give it, humanly speaking, the command of its own fortunes. Though in reviewing the incidents of my administration, I am unconscious of intentional effort, I'm nevertheless too sensible of my defects not to think it probable that I may have committed many errors. Whatever they may be, I fervently beseech the Almighty to avert or mitigate the evils to which they may end. I shall also carry with me the hope that my country will never cease to view them with indulgence, and that, after 45 years of my life dedicated to its service, with an upright zeal, the faults of incompetent abilities will be consigned to oblivion, as myself must soon be, to the mansions of rest. Relying on its kindness in this as in other things, and actuated by that fervent love towards it, which is so natural to a man who views it in the native soil of himself and his progenitors for several generations, I anticipate with pleasing expectation that retreat in which I promise myself to realize without alloy the sweet enjoyment of partaking, in the midst of my fellow citizens, the benign influence of good laws under a free government, the ever-favorite object of my heart, and the happy reward, as I trust, of our mutual cares, labors, and dangers. United States, 19th September, 1796. G. Washington.
Welcome to Right Side Broadcasting Network, your trusted conservative news outlet. At RSBN, we deliver the truth when the mainstream media falls short. Since 2015, we've proudly broadcasted every single one of President Trump's iconic MAGA rallies, bringing you the excitement and energy live before anyone else. By watching RSBN, you get an unfiltered front row view of the action on the ground. We interview the crowds to give a voice to millions of Americans just like you. We show you President Trump's speeches in their entirety, free from interruptions and censorship. We cover the stories that matter to you with the integrity and passion you deserve. Thank you for choosing RSBN as your home for America First News. Together, we stand strong, united, and informed. So join us and be part of the right side of history.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our first ever mega sale on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save over 50% on this season's flannel sheets. Queen size only $59.98. Kings only $69.98. They sell out fast every year, so order now. Save 20% on our brand new My Crosses. They're designed in the likeness of the one I've worn every day for over 20 years. They come in men's and women's, and they're made right here in the USA. Get our 2025 six-piece My Towel sets for only $29.98. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, just $14.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our first ever mega sale. But wait, remember that $75 free shipping rule? Well, that ship is sailed because right now, every order ships absolutely free.
Hey y'all, it's Silk from the Diamond and Silk Chit Chat live show. Look, don't forget to check me out right here on RSBN Network. Be sure to watch the show on Right Side Broadcasting Network, and I want you to support Right Side Broadcasting Network. Yes, it's imperative that you do so, okay? I look to see y'all soon. Bye-bye.